He read the invitation back to himself. One more time quietly, the way a person recites something they have already memorized but want to feel again. And he smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the kind that forms when a man believes he has arranged the final scene of a story entirely on his own terms. The card was thick, cream-colored, embossed with gold lettering. The event was a gala, his gala. The kind that gets photographed for the business section of the Globe and Mail and framed in lobby displays outside boardrooms. The invitation had been sent to exactly one person he had not needed to invite, and he had sent it anyway. Her name was Tamara O.C. Wren. She had not been his wife. She had been something more complicated than that, and far more inconvenient for him to explain at dinner parties, so he had stopped explaining and started omitting. She had been his partner in the original sense of the word, not the romantic kind, though there had been that too, briefly, badly, and with consequences neither of them had fully recovered from, but his business partner, his co-founder, the woman who had sat across from him at a kitchen table in a 2-bedroom apartment in Scarborough and told him, without any particular drama, that she had a plan. That was 14 years ago. Now he was Clifford Payne, founder of Payne Digital Solutions, recipient of the Business Innovation Award from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and the man whose photograph appeared on the cover of Report on Business with the caption, "The architect of his own success." He had not corrected the caption. Tamara knew. She had read it on her phone at her desk in her office on the 41st floor of a tower on Bay Street, and she had set the phone face down and said nothing to no one, because her assistant was not in the room and there was no one to say anything to. She had simply placed the phone down and returned to the contract she had been reviewing. And she had not thought about Clifford Payne again for 11 days, until the invitation arrived. It came by courier, which was how she knew he had meant it. Email could be dismissed as automated. A courier was a statement. The envelope had her full name on it, not her business name, not the abbreviated version she used professionally, but her full given name, the one her mother had chosen because it meant one who makes her mark. And inside was a card informing her that she was cordially invited to the annual Payne Digital Innovation Gala to be held at the Fairmont Royal York, black tie, champagne reception at 7. There was a handwritten note clipped to the card. It said, "Would love for you to see how far we've come. See, we." She set the card on her desk. She looked at it for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and called her assistant. "Confirm my attendance for the Payne Digital Gala," she said, "and book a table. The full table. 12 seats." Her assistant paused. 12? 12, she said, and ended the call. Tamara had grown up in Brampton, in a house that smelled like her mother's cooking and the particular kind of exhaustion that comes from working double shifts at a hospital. Her mother was a registered practical nurse who took the bus to work because the car had needed repairs for so long that it eventually became easier to accept the bus as the permanent arrangement. Her father had left when she was 9, not dramatically, not with shouting or broken dishes, but quietly, a Monday morning departure that she had not been told about in advance, and that her mother had explained simply as, he needed to find a different life. Tamara had decided at age 11 that she would find hers before anyone could take it from her. She had been relentlessly, sometimes exhaustingly, strategic. Scholarships, part-time work, a computer science degree from the University of Waterloo that she had finished in 3 years by taking summer courses and refusing to attend parties. Not because she did not enjoy people. She did, genuinely, but because she understood, with the cold clarity of someone who has watched their mother count bus fare, that she could not afford to enjoy them the way others did. She had met Clifford in her second year of grad school. He was charming in the way that people are charming when they know they're being watched, which is to say always and precisely. He had ideas. He talked about them the way people all talk about ideas they have not yet tested against reality, with enormous enthusiasm and almost no specificity. But Tamara had specificity. She had notebooks full of it. And when she listened to his ideas, she could see exactly how they would fail, and exactly how they wouldn't, if you made 17 precise adjustments and sourced the right infrastructure and filed the correct patent applications before the window closed. She told him all of this. He wrote it down. For 3 years, they had built Payne Digital Solutions together. She had named it, reluctantly, because he had asked her to, and because she did not yet understand that allowing someone else's name on something you built is not generosity, but a kind of slow forgetting that begins the moment the papers are signed. His name was on the incorporation documents, because he had insisted, and she had let it go, because they were together then, personally, and she had confused the temporary warmth of that arrangement with permanence. The relationship ended before the company succeeded. That was the part people did not know, because Clifford did not tell it that way. He told a cleaner story, a story about a man with a vision, difficult early years, a moment of clarity, and then growth. The story had a protagonist and some minor characters and no co-founders. Tamara had not fought it. She had taken her settlement, a legal arrangement that had required 3 months, 2 lawyers, and 1 mediator, and that Clifford's people had tried to minimize at every turn. And she had walked out of the meeting room on a Tuesday afternoon in November, with a check and a non-disclosure agreement, and a very clear understanding of exactly what had been done to her. She had gone home. She had sat in her apartment, a different apartment by then, a small one in Cabottown, and she had eaten a bowl of rice and beans that she had made herself because she found cooking meditative, and she had thought without bitterness, without anger, simply as a practical assessment. What do I do next? She had built Brook Applied Technologies in 4 years. Not as a response to Clifford. That was how people would later characterize it. And she had never bothered to correct them because the correction would have required explaining. And she did not explain herself to audiences that were looking for a simpler story. She had built it because she had a better idea than the one she had given to Clifford, and because the money from the settlement, carefully invested, had given her a window, and she was not going to miss a window twice. Brook Applied Technologies was now valued at $2.3 billion. She had not put that on any magazine cover. She did not need to. The morning of the gala, Clifford was standing in his suite at the Fairmont, and adjusting the cuffs of his tuxedo shirt, and telling his fiancée, a woman named Petra, who worked in wealth management, and had excellent posture and a habit of tilting her head when she found something uninteresting, that tonight was going to be important. How important? Petra asked, not looking up from her phone. Historic, he said, and he meant it in the small way that people mean things when they have not had sufficient cause to recalibrate their sense of scale. He had been thinking about Tamara for 3 days. Not in the way he used to. That was finished. Had been finished for a long time. But in the way a man thinks about a loose end he has convinced himself is not bothering him. He had heard, through the kind of casual, professional gossip that circulates in the financial corridors of Bay Street, the way weather circulates through Toronto in March, unpredictably, thoroughly, that Tamara Wren's company had had a significant quarter. He had also heard something else, something less specific, something he hadn't been able to confirm, that she had been acquiring things. He had not asked anyone to clarify. He had sent the invitation instead, because the gala was his night, his stage, his choreography, and having Tamara there as an audience member struck him as the correct final arrangement of a story that had been bothering him in small ways since the settlement. He wanted her to see what she had left. He wanted her to understand, without him having to say it, that the name on the door was his name and had always been his name, and that whatever she had done after was smaller and less significant and belonged in a different category entirely. He was not prepared for what she had done instead. The ballroom of the Fairmont Royal York, when it is set for a gala, is one of those rooms that makes people feel the occasion before they have processed what the occasion is. The chandeliers are original. The ceiling is high enough that sound travels differently than it does in ordinary rooms, voices carrying farther than expected, laughter arriving slightly after it leaves. The tables were set with white linens and low centerpieces of white and gold flowers, and the room was already half full when Clifford entered from the side corridor at 7:15 with Petra on his arm and a publicist 3 steps behind him. He moved through the room the way he always moved through rooms he had arranged for himself, with the particular ease of a person who knows where all the furniture is because he put it there. He shook hands. He accepted congratulations. He made the rounds. And then he saw her. Tamara O.C. Wren was standing near the center of the ballroom, not at the edge, not in a corner, not in any of the positions that would have suggested she was uncertain about her right to be there. She was wearing a deep burgundy gown, long and clean-lined, and her hair was natural and pinned loosely at her neck with something gold. She was talking to 2 people Clifford did not immediately recognize, and she was laughing at something one of them had said. Not the careful, socially calibrated laugh that people perform at events like this, but a real one, the kind that reaches the eyes. Around her stood 4 individuals who were not laughing. They were not being unfriendly. They were simply present in the particular way that people are present when presence is their professional purpose. The man to her left was tall, with a very calm face. The woman to her right wore a dark blazer and watched the room with the systematic efficiency of someone who has been trained to catalog everything that moves. Several people near Tamara had noticed the configuration. A man from a fintech firm who was standing near the bar touched his colleague's elbow and said quietly, "Is that who I think it is?" His colleague, a woman in blue who had done her MBA at Rotman, said, "Yes." There was a pause. Then she added, "She bought Meridian Collective last spring. Did you hear about that?" The man from the fintech firm had not heard about that. Clifford had also not heard about that. He kept moving. He found his table. He sat. The publicist appeared at his shoulder and informed him that the keynote would begin at 8 and that the award presentation had been confirmed for 8:40. Clifford nodded and picked up his water glass and set it down again without drinking from it. He was thinking about the phrase Meridian Collective. Meridian Collective was an infrastructure firm. It provided back-end architecture services, the kind of technical foundation that software companies built on top of. It was not glamorous work, and it was not widely discussed in the mainstream business press, which was part of why he hadn't paid attention to it. But he knew the name. He knew it because Payne Digital had been in preliminary conversations with Meridian Collective about a service contract 18 months ago. Conversations that had stalled and been tabled. He had not followed up because his team had advised that Meridian was in financial difficulty and might not be the most stable partner. If Tamara had acquired Meridian Collective, if she now owned the infrastructure firm that Payne Digital had been in conversations with, then she was not simply a former partner who had done well for herself. She was something else entirely, something he had not accounted for. He looked across the room at her again. She was no longer laughing. She was listening to a man in a charcoal blazer. Jeffrey Wren. Clifford recognized him now, one of the senior partners at a Bay Street law firm, and she was listening with the focused, slightly tilted attention of someone who is receiving information they already know but are confirming from a second source. She had not looked at Clifford once. He found this, unreasonably, more unsettling than if she had. The keynote was given by the Chamber of Commerce president, a woman with an efficient delivery and a good sense of when to pause for effect, and it covered the theme of the evening: Canadian innovation in the global marketplace, with competence and the appropriate number of statistics. The room listened politely. The champagne flowed. The appetizers were passed. At 8:40, the lights shifted slightly, and the a broadcaster Clifford had specifically requested, a man with a well-known face and a voice that conveyed both authority and warmth, took the stage. The Business Innovation Award, the MC began, recognizes not just the achievement of a moment, but the sustained effort of vision, execution, and the particular Canadian quality of doing things without necessarily requiring the world's permission. There was appreciative laughter. This year's recipient has built something that the industry has taken note of, and the chamber is pleased to honor that work tonight. Clifford straightened in his chair. Petra placed her hand on his arm briefly, then returned it to her lap. Before I bring him to the stage, the MC continued, we have a brief presentation from one of tonight's presenting sponsors. Please welcome to the podium, Ms. Tamara O.C. founder and CEO of Brook Applied Technologies. The room applauded. Clifford did not move. He had not known. He had not known she was a presenting sponsor. He had not known because the Gala organizing committee had handled sponsorships separately from the programming, and because the name on the sponsorship documentation had been Brook Applied Technologies and not her name personally, and because he had not looked closely enough at the program to notice, and because he had been so certain of the architecture of this evening, who was at the center of it, who was at the edge, that he had not thought to check. Tamara walked to the podium. She did not look at him on the way there. She adjusted the microphone once, looked out at the room with the expression of someone entirely uninterested in performing comfort, because they are genuinely comfortable, and said, "Good evening." She paused for exactly the right length of time. "Innovation," she said, "is rarely as solitary as we make it sound in award speeches. It happens in conversations. It happens in kitchens and in small offices with bad lighting and in partnerships that don't always get recognized in the official account." Another pause, shorter this time. "I know something about that." No one in the room moved. "What I've learned, what I've spent 14 years confirming, is that the work always leaves a trace. You can remove a name from a document. You can tell a cleaner version of a story. You can build a stage and arrange the lighting and decide who stands in the center of the photograph. But the work knows where it started, and so do the people who were there." She looked down briefly at the podium, then back up. Brook Applied Technologies is proud to present tonight's Business Innovation Award. We believe in recognizing achievement. We also believe in accuracy. She looked at the envelope in her hand. She opened it. "This year's recipient," she said. And then she paused one more time, and in that pause Clifford felt something move through him that he had no word for, something cold and structural, like a foundation shifting. "Is Lena Oz Calloway, Director of Emerging Technologies at the Canadian Centre for Digital Infrastructure, for her decade of work in open-source public sector innovation." The room applauded. It was not Clifford's name. It had never been announced as Clifford's name. He realized, in the 2 or 3 seconds of disorientation that followed, that he had simply assumed. The chamber had told him he was being honored at the gala. They had not specified this award. There were, he now understood, multiple recognitions this evening, and the one he had been promised was a different one, later, smaller, a certificate of commendation that would be distributed at the end of the night with a handshake and no podium. He had built the entire evening in his mind around a moment that had never been his to begin with. Lena O.C. Calloway walked to the stage from a table near the back. She was a woman in her mid-40s in a navy suit who shook Tamara's hand warmly and took the award with the expression of genuine, uncomplicated gratitude. The room applauded again, longer this time. Tamara returned to her table without looking at Clifford's. The dinner passed the way. Dinners pass when one person at a table of 12 is managing a private reckoning, and the other 11 are unaware of it. Petra ate her halibut and made conversation with the couple on her left. The woman worked in urban planning. The man was an architect who had done some interesting work in modular housing. And Clifford sat beside her and smiled when smiling was required, and spoke when spoken to, and thought about Meridian Collective. He thought about the service contract conversations. He thought about the 18 months that had elapsed. He thought about the particular legal architecture of infrastructure service agreements, and what it would mean, concretely, for Payne Digital if the infrastructure partner they had been in preliminary discussions with was now owned by someone who had very specific reasons for understanding exactly how Payne Digital worked. He thought about the non-disclosure agreement. He thought about what it covered and what it did not cover, and how long ago it had been filed. He excused himself from the table at 9:30. He walked to the corridor near the coat check, which was quieter, and he stood there for a moment and took out his phone. He called his general counsel. The call went to voicemail. He called his CFO, also voicemail. It was 9:30 on a Thursday evening, and the people who handled his problems were at home or asleep or otherwise unavailable. And Clifford was standing in a corridor at the Fairmont Royal York in a tuxedo that had cost $4,000, and he was trying to calculate, alone, without support, the specific dimensions of his exposure. This was not a feeling he was accustomed to. He had arranged his life very deliberately to avoid it. He put his phone in his pocket. He turned back toward the ballroom, and in the corridor, walking toward him from the direction of the ballroom, was Tamara. She was alone. The people who had been standing near her all evening were not with her at this particular moment. She was simply a woman in a burgundy gown, walking through a corridor, and she looked at him when she saw him, and she did not slow down or speed up. "Clifford," she said, and there was nothing in her voice. Not warmth, not coldness, not any of the things he had spent 3 days imagining she might feel. Tamara, he had not prepared anything to say. He had prepared for a room full of witnesses and a scripted dynamic. Himself in the center, her on the periphery. This was not that. "I didn't know you were a presenting sponsor." "I know you didn't," she said. She stopped. She was not, he noticed, carrying her phone or her clutch. Her hands were at her sides. "The Meridian acquisition," he said. It was not a question exactly. "Yes," she said. "That was," he searched for the word. "Strategic. Most things I do are." There was a pause. It stretched past the point of comfortable silence into the territory of something more honest. "The invitation," he said eventually. "I know what you thought," she said. And then, with the precision of someone who has considered exactly what they want to say, and decided to say it once and only once, "You thought I needed to see it. You thought this was still a story about you." She looked at him without anger, without pity, with the kind of steady, clear regard that people develop when they have spent a long time being accurate. "I came because it was a good event and I was a sponsor, and I wanted to see Lena receive that award. She's been doing important work for a long time, and people don't always notice it." A small pause. "I know something about that too." He said nothing. "You don't need to worry about Meridian," she added. "I'm not interested in your company, Clifford. I never was. I was interested in building something of my own." She glanced back in the direction of the ballroom. "I've done that." She walked past him down the corridor. He stood there for a moment. Then he walked back into the ballroom, past the tables with their white linens and low centerpieces of gold and white flowers, past the conversations and the champagne glasses and the soft movement of people who were having an uncomplicated evening, and he found his table, and he sat down, and Petra looked at him and said, "Everything okay?" "Fine," he said. She went back to her conversation with the urban planner. Clifford sat quietly and thought about the difference between the story you build about yourself and the story that's actually being written, and how you sometimes don't find out which one is real until you're in a corridor in a tuxedo at 9:30 in the evening with no one on the other end of the phone. Tamara left the gala at 10:15. Her car was waiting on Front Street. It was a Tuesday, and she had an early call the next morning with a team in Waterloo who was running a pilot program that she had been quietly funding for 8 months. A machine learning application designed to help community health workers in under-resourced neighborhoods triage and navigate care for their patients. The kind of work that does not get magazine covers, but that her mother, who had taken the bus to the hospital for 31 years, would have recognized immediately as the correct use of an inheritance. She sat in the back of the car. The driver, a man named Derek, who had been driving for her for 2 years and who had developed the professional gift of perfect conversational neutrality, pulled into traffic without asking how the evening had been. Through the window, the city was doing what Toronto does in November, lit and purposeful and indifferent to personal weather. The CN Tower rose above the lakeshore to the west. Bay Street was still lit, in the particular way it is lit when the markets are closed and the buildings are mostly empty, but the light hasn't been told to stop yet. She had not said everything she could have said to Clifford in that corridor. She had considered, in the days between receiving the invitation and attending the event, what she might say to him if the moment arose. She had thought about the kitchen table in Scarborough. She had thought about the non-disclosure agreement and the 3 months and the two lawyers and the mediator and the Tuesday afternoon in November. She had thought about all the people who had been in those early rooms, the investors she had briefed, the clients she had called, the developers she had recruited, the culture she had built in a company that now bore only his name. And she had thought about what it would mean to say all of that out loud, in a corridor, to a man in an expensive tuxedo who had arranged the evening to watch her stand at the edge of something he believed was his. She had decided not to say most of it. Not because it wasn't true, because she had already spent 14 years living the rebuttal. And the rebuttal was in the numbers and the valuation, and the award she had just presented to a woman doing important, unglamorous work, and in the 8 months of quiet funding in Waterloo, and in the phone call she had tomorrow morning, and none of that required Clifford Payne's acknowledgement to be real. There was a park near her building that ran alongside a small creek. She did not usually take walks at night, but the evening was clear and dry for November, and Derek dropped her at the corner rather than the door, which is what she had asked him to do when she wanted to walk on the last half block alone. She stood for a moment at the low bridge that crossed the creek. The water was low at this time of year, moving quietly between the stones. A light upstream threw a reflection across the surface that shifted when the wind moved through the bare branches above it. She held the invitation in her hand. She had put it in her clutch that morning. Without thinking too carefully about why, she looked at it for a moment, the cream card, the gold lettering, the handwritten note that said "we." Then she folded it once, carefully, along a crease that ran through the word, and she placed it in the small recycling bin at the end of the bridge, the kind the city installs in parks, because Toronto has always believed in providing the infrastructure for people to let things go cleanly. She walked home. The creek moved quietly behind her. The city made its particular sound, not loud, not silent, the sound of a place that has been continuously inhabited by people living their actual lives. And above it, somewhere in the direction of the lake, a single light crossed the sky and disappeared into the dark on the other side of the water.